Welcome to, and I don't know what number this is for our Public Power Breakfast. This is for those of you who have not attended them before, that are new to LES, this really is a time where we not only celebrate public power, but where we like to educate and kind of remind everybody of some key factors that really are attributes of public power that make us different, make us special. In fact, I think the entire program today will highlight that in, I think, a fairly affirmative way. So I'm not going to talk long because we've got actually a great program for you this morning, but I do want to talk about what I see and I think the industry sees as the key attributes of public power. And first of all, that's locally owned, locally governed. We all know that we're owned by the City of Lincoln. We all know that we have a 9-member governing body that makes the decisions with respect to the policies associated with how we operate, plan, and manage our utility. And those folks are volunteers, and probably I should say, I don't know how many board members we have, but I won't make you stand up, but would board members raise their hands? Please. Don? Thanks, Don. These folks do volunteer, they do spend a lot of time and are very supportive of what we do, and they're key to really the success of LES, just like you all are. So the first thing is locally owned, locally governed. Second is high reliability. The third would be basically high value, low cost. And the fourth would be community engagement. And if we look at reliability, you know, there's lots of factors of reliability that we all know, depending on whether you're in the generation production side and you look about what your outage factors are, whether you're on the line side, but probably for the customer, it's how long is their power out. So if we look at the common outage statistic for that, which is SAIDI, we all affectionately call System Average Interruption Duration Index, reflects the average amount of time in a year any customer would expect to be out of power. For us, over the last 5 years, under a normal weather situation, that's averaged about 25 minutes. If you look at the industry average, that's about 130 minutes. So our customers experience 1/5 the outage time that the national average does. And you can imagine there's a lot of them over 130 minutes as well. Secondly, if we talk about low cost, I think you all have the table tents and a variety of things that are looking at the Big Ten rankings where we are #1, which we think we're very proud of. It's really just a way to highlight how effective we are with respect to controlling costs, which is, you know, basically we all do it in different ways, and it's important, and it's not only a key value, but when you couple that with reliability, that's one of the things that drives the economic development in this community as well. If we look at a national rate survey, overall, we're 16th lowest in the country of those that we survey, which we try to get representative of really all the utilities and major utilities in the country. If you look at our regional rate comparisons, in most cases, we're the absolute lowest in several states of larger utilities. So we're proud of it. Obviously, we all have to work at it in order to make that work, and it takes everyone to make that happen as well. And finally, if we talk about customer engagement, and that is where the community portion of what public power does is so important. And it can be as simple as, you know, we have a meeting on Thursday evening that's our public meeting with respect to our proposed budget and rates. We're meeting with the large industrial customers early that morning. You know, whether it's the DIP project and you all meet with the community in order to convey that, whether it's a sustainable energy program. It goes on and on with respect to our engagement, not only in groups of our customers, but individually what you all do. A few months ago, we were doing had a safety committee going out, and there were some crews out doing some blind alley work, and the customers literally said, and this is to Mitch's credit and his crew, the customers actually said, you know, when this started, we didn't have a lot of use for LES, and we were angry. And they said basically because of Mitch and the crews and how they dealt with all those people, how comfortable they were and how happy they were that LES was there. That's what you all do every day. It's the people that make LES work, and we should celebrate that. But we should also celebrate it by making sure when we talk to our neighbors, our friends, our relatives, we talk about what public power means, not only in how we serve our customers, but what it means to the community. So those are the kind of things I'd like to leave you with. But finally, if we talk about our community and how we serve, it's also the public power community. You know, we are a member of a public power, 2,000 plus public power entities in the country. We're the 22nd largest of those entities. So we actually have, probably a different profile, but there are 160 utilities in this state, and they are all public power utilities. So they're all celebrating that at the same time. And when we look at public power in its entirety, it makes, I think, a huge difference in a lot of people's lives. Again, we're going to hear more about that later on. And just like doing mutual aid, last year we were in Florida, this year we're in Florida, providing help to our peers that needed it. It not only takes the folks that volunteer to go do that, it takes the folks that stay at home to make up the work that's not getting done when they're gone, and the folks that have to support everything from the logistics and everything going forward. So it isn't just an effort with the guys that go, which is actually very important, but there's a lot of people involved in those efforts on everything we do. And without everyone here, we could not be successful, and thank you very much for what you do. It would be unusual for me to end not talking about safety and cybersecurity and physical security. And you all have to remember it, and you have to remember we have, unfortunately, some examples just recently of some of the members of our family who, whether it's John, it's Jared, who just in one moment, their lives changed dramatically. So it's not just safety at work, it's safety everywhere. It's the same thing with cyber, same thing with physical security. All of those issues are key to what we do in staying safe. Please keep them and their families in your prayers and thoughts, and other folks that may be experiencing things that many of us don't know about, certainly as well as those families of the people that were in the Las Vegas incident yesterday. So with that, we have a short slideshow, and then we'll introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm Kelly Porter, the Communications Manager here at LES, and if you may recall, last year was our 50th anniversary, and so we didn't have a Public Power Week breakfast. Instead, we put all of our efforts into a pretty big picnic program. So in front of you is a program, and on the back, flip it over, and we're going to acknowledge service anniversaries both for this year, starting with 5 years, and also for last year. So that's why the list is a pretty long list. So if you celebrated a service anniversary last year or this year, I'm going to go ahead and have you stand up. And then those of you not standing, please clap, hoot, holler, whatever you feel most comfortable doing. And we'll go ahead and recognize those service anniversaries. So first, if you last year celebrated, or this year celebrated your 5th anniversary, please stand up. Great. Now, if you celebrated your 10th anniversary, this year or last year. you celebrated your 15th service anniversary, please stand up. If you celebrated your 20th service anniversary, please stand up. If last year or this year you celebrated 25 years at LES, please stand up. If you celebrated your 30th service anniversary, please stand. "35 years at LES, please stand. If last year or this year you celebrated 40 years at LES, please stand. And while the list may be small here, if you celebrated 45 years at Lincoln Electric System this year or last year, please stand. Thank you so much. And I'm so proud of this because we have a great speaker for you today. I'm honored to introduce him. Walter Wally Haas is the general manager of the Navajo Tribal Utility Authority, and he's here to discuss a little bit of his projects with us today. 9 years ago, he took the helm over the multi-utility owned and operated by the Navajo Nation, the largest land-based Native American tribe in the United States. Their service territory is 27,000 square miles, so to put that in perspective, LES is 200 square miles, so that's 27,000 square miles. It's very big. Across northern Arizona, northwestern New Mexico, and southeastern Utah. The Navajo Tribal Utility Authority has about 41,000 electric customers. Wally is an electrical engineer by education, also from Chicago, I found out, and is currently the chairman of the American Public Power Association. In 2011, he received APPA's prestigious James D. Donovan Individual Achievement Award, and this award recognizes people who have made substantial contributions to the electric utility industry with a special commitment to public power. Wally is dedicated to fulfill energy and electric development on the Navajo Nation, where an estimated 15,000 families still live without basic electric service. He's going to share with us how he's working on a project to address this crisis. Please help me welcome Wally Haas.
Well, good morning. Yatahe Beni, that means hello and good morning in Navajo. So I wanted to start out and say hello to everybody. I'm going to get off my speech a little bit just because I was able to come out here and visit you folks, and it's my pleasure and honor to be here. I came out a day early because there's no easy travel for me to go anywhere, and I really got the opportunity to see your community. And I don't want to say that I was impressed by your community because I didn't have any preconceived notion. Originally being from Midwest, I expected to see a Midwestern city, and I was really, really pleasantly surprised on how vibrant it is and how you've already overcome some of the challenges that the other Midwestern cities have with the Rust Belt. And I came in late on Sunday, and you guys already had your football game on Friday, right? You already beat Illinois, right? Okay. We won't have to talk about that anymore. But I went downtown to dinner with Kevin, and we couldn't find a place to park. We drove around looking for a place to park and just saw all the people on the street enjoying themselves in the beautiful weather. And I was extremely happy, really was. I was proud to be a Midwesterner at that moment because of that vibrancy. And all the people seemed to be enjoying themselves. So I was really impressed by that. Yesterday, I also had the opportunity to visit many of you folks. I got to see a whole bunch of different places in the tour through the processes. And again, I'm really impressed with everything you've done for your organizations and for your communities. And I really want to say thank you to everybody who was on the tours with me. I'm not going to name everybody's names, but you guys, you folks, men and women who were with me and walked me through everything, you did a wonderful job, and I learned so much about your community from that standpoint. I got to see not only the downtown area, the Haymarket area, and the rural areas in Lancaster County. I got to go see the Roby generating station where you've got your gas peakers out there, and learned about the innovation that you did with your ice making machines and how that was replicated in many other areas in the United States, and how your plant operates and how you favor the number one unit, the older unit from that standpoint. I also learned a little bit about your wind project. I got to actually see it when I went to the other facility, but I learned about the wind project and your innovation with wind, where you had the community support you ahead of time to be part of that and create the sustainability and to get to understand that. I got to see your 5 megawatt solar facility, which is nice, impressive. You did the right timing for that, and you've set yourself very well to be able to expand that and learn from that in the future. I got to see your service center. I got to go through 3 or 4 security checkpoints in your service center. It's the first time I've ever been in one building having to go through so much security. So I'm glad you take that seriously. I was extremely impressed. I got to meet a bunch of folks. They're very, very happy and proud of the accomplishments that you did, and I am too. I got to go out and see your Terry Bundy generating station. In New York, I had an LM6000, so we had a little bit of things to talk about, right? I got to see how you did the cooling in that to increase your capacity. Again, another very innovative idea that you've had and worked on. And I'm impressed that you're doing a lot of the work on tearing down the unit and rebuilding the unit locally with your own folks, the ex-military folks and the other folks. It's very impressive that you don't have to send everything out. So it was really, really very interesting. And then, you as an example of public power, you go above and beyond. So you took the landfill gas project, which is not an economic project that you do for the economy. It's not a low-cost source. But you didn't want to waste the resource. You wanted to make sure that you got some value for the community and the resource, and that's what public power is about. It really is. All these innovations that I kind of talked about wouldn't have happened unless you're public power. And I really like I'm going to call it public-to-public partnership that you have with the state and with the city and with the county and your district heating projects and district cooling projects. That's a really innovative situation. And then to have another public relationship where you folks manage it, it's very unique, and it shows that you care about your community and you're trying to keep costs down so that the dollars can be spent in the right place. What do I mean by that? Well, the relationship you have with the county, the relationship you have with the jail in that, by providing those low-cost services in this an alternative manner, it allows to have money to be able to support those programs. You can spend money on the school as opposed to spending money on its utilities and things like that. So I just wanted to tell you, people have talked about this, and I hear little rumblings here when I came out. They talk about, investor-owned utilities and things like that. Well, you had investor-owned utilities many, many years ago, right? And then you had a public power utility take you over, and that public power utility was remote, right? And your community felt that you could do a better job than that other public power utility, and you have, right? You took it over, you bonded with the community, and you made things better. You raised the standard of living for the people you serve, right? And you made your decisions based on the values of the community, not based on the shareholders' profits. So I'm very, very proud of you folks, and I just wanted to go off my speech a little bit just to thank you for all the things that you've done for your community, because I'm sure you don't hear it enough. So with that said, I'd like to share with you a little bit of my journey in public power and my involvement. And I really want to talk about how things changed really in the last 8 years of my life. I've been in public power for about 25 years. We're very customer, in my opinion, we don't exist if we don't have customers, right? So we have to remember that. That's something we a lot of times overlook, the fact that we exist for our customers and we need to be respectful of that and honor those folks. Like I said, I've been involved for 25 years, and about 9 years ago, my life took a dramatic change and a difference, and it wasn't anticipated. It wasn't what I thought was going to happen and what I expected. And it gives me an opportunity to change people's lives for the better. And that's what you folks did, 100 years ago when you first started your projects and continued in growth into your rural areas and everything else. So I want to give you an opportunity to know me a little bit. I'm an electrical engineer, University of Illinois. Don't hold that against me. I have an MBA from Keller Grad School, okay? I actually, born and raised in Chicago, and I actually come from a union family. So in my family, I have union electricians, carpenters, gas operators. In fact, I worked in the IBEW Local 134 during the summer when I was in college, wiring buildings and doing things like that. I started my public power career in a very wealthy suburb of Chicago called St. Charles. I spent 8 years there. I moved from there and I went to a place called Rocky Mount, North Carolina, where I operated a natural gas system and an electrical system. I spent 2 years and 3 hurricanes in North Carolina. I went the third hurricane, so let me back up a little bit. At this point in time, I have 3 little kids. They're all in diapers. I have twin daughters that are they were born in North Carolina, so they were maybe a year at the most. And I had a son that was a couple years older, so everybody's in diapers. The third hurricane, I went to work on Friday night about midnight, so I went home and slept a little bit. I came home on Wednesday about 6 o'clock at night, and I had turned the power on to my wife's house and the children's house about an hour before I got home. I walked in the door. The first thing my wife said to me wasn't, "How are things going?" and "You all right?" or anything like that. She says, "You need to get a new job." So, with that said, I left. I went to work in Western New York for 7 years for the City of Jamestown Board of Public Utilities, multi-service utility. We did electric, water, wastewater, district heat, believe it or not. We did a European-style district heating system in the whole downtown. We had over 55, 60 buildings connected to it before I left. And we also picked up the garbage. We ran a natural gas we ran a coal-fired power plant, and we integrated an LM6000 into that coal-fired power plant and ran that. And then I had left there, and I had worked in the village of Sherburne for a year. And then in 2008, I answered the call from a headhunter to interview with the Navajo Nation. And I went out to interview with them, and I was hired there as a general manager. I left my wife and 3 kids behind in Western New York and ventured out into the Navajo Nation. It's been almost 10 years now. This is my 10th year. My family still lives in Western New York. I go home about once a month for a week. I want to make sure that I stay involved with my children's lives, and I have to tackle the honey-do list, right? And now, to be honest with you, my 3 kids are in college. I'm actually kind of afraid to go home. But going to the Navajo Nation was really, I never imagined it, to be honest with you. It's never something I thought I would do. I'm like everybody else. I grew up in Chicago. I took for granted what it meant to turn on a light switch, right? When power was out, I responded if I was in my own territory, or I waited for someone else to respond and it came on relatively quickly. It's very different where I live now from that standpoint. And it's an experience that I really wasn't prepared for that much and didn't really understand. When I arrived in Navajo Nation, we still had 18,000 families without access to electricity. It wasn't because they didn't want electricity, it's because we couldn't afford to get them electricity, and we were left behind to a certain degree. Some general information: the Navajo Nation has 300,000 citizens that are Navajo Nation citizens in the United States. We have about 186,000 that reside within the nation at any given time. 32% of the people are currently without electricity. We have about a little over 41,000 electric customers, 39,000 water customers, 14,000 wastewater customers, 8,000 natural gas. We have a little over 200 PV off-grid solar units, and we have close to 24,000 communication customers. Kind of give you an understanding, it was already said, but we're 27,000 square miles. We still have a few folks or a few other incumbent utilities in our service territories, but we have the right to be in all those territories. We're a little bit larger than the state of West Virginia. Our per capita income for our average family is $10,700 a year. Okay? The rest of the United States is $47,000 a year. 40% of our homes are below the poverty line. Okay? Back when I was in engineering school, they used to teach us about the rural electrification law in 1936. Right? It was a law of humanity signed by President Roosevelt. The act provided for federal loans to install electrical distribution systems to serve isolated areas in the United States. Cities, towns, communities such as yourselves in your rural areas became connected to the electric grid for the first time. But today, 81 years later, I'm in a segment of the country in the United States that still does not have access to electricity, where the Electrification Act hasn't been completely applied. With all the modern conveniences we've grown accustomed to, it's hard to imagine life without electricity. So I'm going to try to explain it to you the best I can. If you don't have electricity, you spend a lot of time just getting the basic necessities of life so that you can sustain your family and stay alive. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you don't have electricity, you don't have a refrigerator, right? Right? How do you cook your food? How do you store your perishables, right? You've got all those complications. If you don't have electricity, it also means you don't have running water, okay? So you've got another complication that you need to deal with. We live in a high mountainous desert area, 6,000, 7,000 foot in the air, so we have a winter. So you have to be able to heat the home or you'll freeze, okay? So what happens is you have a 250-gallon water tank, a plastic tank. You push it in the back of your pickup truck or your trailer, and you drive an hour to an hour and a half to a gas station, right, or a grocery store. The grocery store is the gas station. Okay, it's a convenience store gas station combination. We're not talking about Walmart. We're not talking about Target. Okay, you pick up your supplies that you need there, and you get ice, and you put ice in your cooler, and that's how you keep your perishables. You fill up that 250-gallon water tank at one of my watering stations, you drive it back, you push it back in, and you got 4 or 5 days worth of water, okay? All right? Now, you still have a problem because you have to heat your home, right? So to heat your home, you have to collect firewood or coal, and I do mean coal right out of the mine, and that's what you use to cook your food or heat your home. And your home is not well insulated. It's not a really healthy environment. People have said, well, why don't I help make the home more insulated? Well, if I do that, I'm going to kill people because the fumes from burning coal and wood are toxic. Okay? So when the ice melts, your refrigeration's done, right? In addition to that, you have to think about the next piece of the equation, communications. Only 40% of my 55,000 homes have a landline phone in them. Okay? 60% don't have a landline phone. Most of our roads are dirt roads, and I was on some of your dirt roads. Shelley took me on them, and your dirt roads are really cool. They're nice. When we have a dirt road, what happens is I'll put in a water line. That becomes the road because I cleared the field, put it in, and leveled it out. The problem with that equation is there's ruts in there and all those problems, so they'll skim them, and within 4 or 5 years, my water line becomes exposed, right? Because they move the earth off of it. But that's our road system. So when you have an emergency, you call 911, which, by the way, doesn't exist where I'm at. It's just starting to be implemented right now. But when you talk to somebody about providing emergency services, there's no address system on the Navajo Nation, so you actually have to give a landmark like we did when we were kids. And you got to hope that whoever you're talking with knows that landmark so that they can provide you, right? Now, think about it from a kid's standpoint, okay? A little children's standpoint. We have right now a 46.5% unemployment rate. It was 52.5% when I started. And we have people that want to work and need to work to sustain themselves. So the people who have children, they have to leave the Navajo Nation, and most of those folks are tradesmen, the men are, and a lot of the women work in the service industry. They go to Vegas or California or somewhere else to work, right? And they want to provide a paycheck back home. The kids stay with the elders. So our typical family unit is 4 folks. It's usually the elders raising their grandkids because they want to be raised in that language and that tradition, and they have a special connection with the earth and where they've lived. Because think about it, if you lived in an area that your ancestors have been there for thousands of years, and I mean your blood relatives, you're not going to want to leave that land either, right? Because you're going to feel that disconnection with everybody, okay? So going back to a child, what happens is the grandparents take the child to the main road and sit with them in the car in the main road because there's no bus area for the bus to come. So the bus will stop, pick up the kids. Kids will be on the bus. They'll leave while it's dark. Kids will be on the bus for an hour, hour and a half. They'll go to school. They'll have electricity. They'll have running water in the school. Most of the schools, not all of them, do have communications products in those schools. And they'll get fed, and then they'll get on the bus to come home. Hour, hour and a half later, they'll get home. It'll be dark. Their grandparents will be waiting for them in the car to take them back to the house. And then their grandparents will cook for them on a wood stove or a coal stove or cook outside for them, right? And then when they want to do homework, they've got to have a gas lantern or a candlelight or a flashlight, right? Right? So it's a difficult situation for those folks to go through all those processes. So I wanted to explain that to you because it's not intrinsic for any of us, right? We haven't lived through it. It's hard for us to understand that this still is occurring in America. There was a recent segment on PBS about distance learning, and a young man by the name of Terrence was interviewed, and there's a small segment I'd like for you to hear directly so you can learn about the distance learning.
How's the school coming on?
It's fine.
But there are challenges with Terrence Burley's remote learning. He lives in his mother's house, which currently has no electricity or internet.
I use my cell phone to get connected, and on a good day, I usually get 2 bars.
When his laptop runs out of power, Burley recharges it by plugging into his truck, and his day is long.
Usually, I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, be on the road by 4:30 a.m. I get home by 6 p.m. I start my class again from 8 p.m. up to 10 p.m.
And while Terrence Burley estimates he still has 2 years to go, he believes a bachelor's degree is finally within reach.
I just take it course by course, and eventually I'll get there.
So I wanted to share that with you. Terrence is actually an N2A employee. He didn't say that on there, but he's an N2A employee. He actually works in the IT department. Okay, and that's what he's getting his bachelor's degree is in IT from that standpoint. So like Terrence, many of our employees have extended family members and relatives without electricity. That's why we understand the importance of our mission to provide safe, reliable, and affordable utility services that exceed our customers' expectations. So what do I mean by that? Well, you are a low-cost provider, one of the lowest cost providers. I think you're number 16 in the nation for electricity. When natural gas prices went down, you went down. You were probably a little higher before that. Higher meaning probably number 12 or 13 low-cost provider. So an average customer on the Navajo Nation's electric utility in 2015 spent $638.50 for the whole year's worth of electricity. Okay? My margin on that was $32.50. Now, $700 might not seem like a lot. It might seem like a bargain, okay? But when you make only $10,700 in a year, sometimes you have to choose between providing medicine for the elders or put food on the table or pay for your utility bill. It's not a pleasant choice, right? Now, in the rest of the United States, you may be paying $2,000 or $3,000, right? But if you're making $47,000, it's a lot easier to absorb from that standpoint. So, like public power, just like you folks, it's important for us to be as cost-effective and as efficient as possible so that our people can afford our services, okay? because it is a life-changing event from that standpoint. Now, I'm very proud to say that NTUA, in the 10 years that I've been there, when I first got there, we were financially insolvent, and we as a team came together and solved that problem. We were able to access financial markets for the first time in 10 years, about a year and a half after I was there, okay? And I want to be clear, I, as a manager, general manager, I provide a vision, I provide leadership, guidance, but I'm not silly enough to know that I don't do all the work. My staff did the work just like you folks do for Kevin. I understand that, from that standpoint. Good news is we're able to now access capital markets once again. We're able to start the electrification process again because we had to stop it. Before I got there, we were downsizing the workforce, getting less and less people, and we already had a 52% unemployment rate at that point in time. So we had to change the dynamics and the paradigms that we lived in, and we did that. And we did that as a team, as a public power community, because we understood what our people really needed to have. So we fast forward now, we have only 15,000 families without access to electricity. I'd like to say that that number is less, but what happens when we electrify an area, people move back home. They get the opportunity to have electricity. That means they're going to get the opportunity to have water shortly after that. And they want to go back home to their traditional houses and traditions. So we have about 15,000 families, represent 60,000 people. 75% of all the people in the United States without access to station power live within the Navajo Nation. So I'm happy that we've made progress. I would like to make more progress. Give you an understanding, it costs $70,000 on average to provide electricity to one home in the Navajo Nation. The NTUA gives $1,500 credit for that, and at $32.50 a year, that's our margin, I never see the $1,500 credit, right? But it's not about making money, it's about raising the standard of living for the people we serve, right? You folks did this 100 years ago, that's your heritage, that's your history. And believe it or not, all the innovation that we talked about earlier that you've done has raised the standard of living for all of the people here in Lincoln and your surrounding communities. So you're just a little further down the road and more advanced in the things that you're doing than the things that I'm doing. Now, a couple more things I want to talk about. It's wonderful to see that there's 3,000 families that don't have to struggle for basic necessities in life right now. I still have a long way to go. They now have lights when they do their homework. They can even read a newspaper. They can watch TV. They can watch the Super Bowl, right? They power up their computers, their tablets, cell phones. They can even play Pokemon Go, right? So it's much better for the folks, right? This effort to electrify has been challenging, and it's been very, very rewarding, especially as an electrical engineer. There's not many places in the United States where you can actually see homes being connected for the first time. And one of the things I actually like to see the best is what happens is when we electrify an area, the family wants to thank the lineman who electrified them, and many times they'll butcher a sheep and they'll make them come to a dinner and celebrate. That's their way of giving back. It's also interesting to see the elders and others run around and flick on and off all the lights because they never thought they'd have it in their house forever, right? It's also rewarding. A lot of times we tell people our normal business cycle, how long we're going to get to them, but always around Thanksgiving and Christmas, we hurry up and try to get things done early so that they can have electricity for their holiday, right? And it's really rewarding. You see an area that's completely pitch black, right? And then the next thing you know, there's Christmas lights out, right? It's very rewarding to see those things and see that expression going on from that standpoint. It's been one of my missions to help develop outside funding sources so that we can provide electricity to more families. As one of the largest employers, we do that through a whole bunch of different mechanisms, and we get involved in the community and we help support initiatives to help the community become employed. When I started, the unemployment rate was 52.5%. Today, it's at 46.5%. Due to such a low employment rate, we have a lot of working adults living in different places, and I've kind of talked about that way, but there was a couple initiatives that we've done. In 2011, NTUA was awarded a $32 million grant from the federal government, part of the stimulus package, And the grant was for providing communication services to the Navajo people. At the time of the grant, which was entitled the Navajo Nation Middle and Last Mile Project, Quality Broadband for the Navajo People, was the largest broadband grant awarded throughout the United States, and it was the first awarded to a Native American tribe. Because we're special, it took us an extra year to actually convince the government to give us the funding, right? And I'm very, very proud to say we're able to install that and put that in place in 3 years. And because we're special, we weren't allowed to build anything for the first year because they wanted to make sure we got every single right-of-way for the entire project before we could start anything. So we really only had 2 years to build the project. So what was the project? It was 32 microwave tower sites, 570 miles of fiber optic line. We built an advanced data center, Tier 3. We put in over 60 microwave links. So we had to integrate a fiber optic system with a microwave system, and we put in 40 broadcast towers. Okay? We focused on areas that had no service at all or that were very poorly served. So I want to give you an example. We have competitors in that area. We have a place called Cellular One. Cellular One got $110 million in grants in the last 8 years, and I haven't seen them spend the money there. That's why we still had underserved areas that weren't served. And I would know because I have to connect the electricity to any tower to make it work, right? Okay? That's why we took on the challenge, because Cellular One was giving folks phones, right? Lifeline phones, the people would get them for free. They didn't work in their houses because there was no coverage. Now, it was good that they had a phone, right? Because they could go somewhere else and use it, right? But it didn't really serve the purpose that it was meant to serve, to have emergency services and to be able to stay in contact with family members and things like that, right? So that's what we changed. We focused on those unserved areas. Now, 3 years later, we now have 20,000 customers. I have over 90 towers. I have over 92 broadcast stations. When you're on the Navajo Nation, if you have a Verizon phone, an AT&T phone, or a Sprint phone, you're actually on my service. You're on my service. The only reason I could do that is I had to partner up with another company because Verizon, AT&T, Sprint would never trust a Native American tribe to operate a system in their name, right? So I teamed up with another company. They brought additional resources, manpower, and knowledge that I needed to have. And like I said, I have over 20,000 folks now that have a phone that actually works in their house because I won't give them a phone and charge the federal government money unless I can provide the service to those people. There's some unintended consequences that was created by that. One is Cellular One was providing 2G service, right, which is the first generation cell service, right? About a month before we went live, they went from that service to what they said was 4G, and it was really 3G, okay? Now, most recently, they were at the FCC bragging how they have such a large, the only large 4G service on the Navajo Nation. They put up their model and their graph, and they showed the area they're covering. I came and spoke afterwards. I dwarf their area in 4G coverage, and they're not even the second largest footprint because I broadcast 4G for AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint. Okay? And we didn't get any additional federal government subsidies or anything else to take care of those people. Two unintended consequences, they're really good consequences. One was intended, I guess, is those people now actually are in commerce. They sell their animals, they sell their art on the internet, they have a way to provide themselves some income. The biggest unintended consequences, because my family, young family members leave their children behind, I never really thought about this, but how did they stay in contact with their children? Right? If you're a construction worker, you can only come home a few times a year, right? That's the only time you get to see your kids, right? If there's no phone working in the house, you can't stay in contact. The unintended consequence is these people get to use voice over IP phone systems, so they get to Skype. They get to see their parents and talk to their parents daily and regularly. And that's going to have a lasting impact on that social fiber. Those people will stay bonded much better than they did before. So we're very proud of that. We now have 84 employees in that area, highly trained, well-paid folks. So we've grown our workforce in those areas in both the last mile and middle mile. Last thing I want to talk about is we recently built a solar project Not to make your solar project sound small, but we built a 27.3 megawatt solar project in Kayenta, Arizona. And part of our idea is to sell the output of that facility to another public power entity. And right now we're selling it to the City of Phoenix, or SRP. So we're able to provide, for the first time, get dollars from outside our community into our community to benefit our folks. One of the proudest things I'm proud of is at one time we had over 250 employees. 84% of those employees were Navajo folks. So they got to learn a trade. They got taught. There was 1,400 hours of training that the folks went through. It was a 10-month construction period, and there was over $10 million in payroll, and $5.2 million of those dollars went directly to the Navajo folks that live in that area and work in that area. In addition to that, the project brought in over $15 million of goods and services in the region. Before the construction of the project, we had a job fair. I had over 550 people show up at the job fair in a line. Right? It was a one-day event. I had dozens of others apply online. You know, it was a humbling event from that standpoint. In addition to that, there was a new solar project that was being built. It's being built right now in the city of Albuquerque. They were having a hard time attracting a workforce. They contacted us, and many of my folks are now working on that project in Albuquerque. So we're very proud of that. You know, we were put in place in 1959, okay? After the rest of the United States was electrified. We were actually an area that was investor-owned utilities were supposed to service. There were some co-ops that were supposed to service. There were some cities that were supposed to serve my people. And they didn't. They electrified the rest of the United States. They didn't value us, so they didn't provide a service. And later on, when we brought it to their attention, they changed the state laws in Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah so that electric utilities no longer had to provide you electric service and build it into your rates and have the rest of the customers subsidize it. They basically came back and said, if you want electricity, you pay for it. And oh, by the way, we're going to make it a little bit more difficult for you folks. You got to go get your own right-of-way. How is a normal person going to have to go get a federal right-of-way on lands? So that's why we were created. In 1959, the elders decided that the only way they're going to get service, the only way they're going to get taken care of is by their own people. That's what public power does, right? From that standpoint. So I wanted to provide you a little bit of that history and that stuff. And I want to close, you know, as utility professionals, we do share common goals of working on behalf of our customers. We do what we can to keep the rates affordable. We do what we can to provide safe, reliable services, right? We do what we can to bring progress and be involved in our communities. In short, we do what we can to make our customers' lives better or to improve and raise their standard of living. And that's what all of you folks do. So I appreciate the opportunity to share my story with you. So I have some time, if it's okay, to answer a few questions if anybody has any for me. Kevin? Yeah, sure. So because it costs so much money to get electricity out there, and some of the folks are so rural, many, many years ago, we developed an off-grid solar unit package, okay? We're on our 5th generation of that package right now. And the current package is a solar unit. You can't put it on the roofs of the homes because it would collapse the home. So it's a skid-mounted unit, has a little wind turbine associated with it, has a battery, and it actually comes with a refrigerator that's specifically designed. And the refrigerator is kind of the ones you had in college, the little ones, but they're specifically designed because if you put a real refrigerator on it, it would tank the unit, right? Now, it does okay for folks, right, because now they get refrigeration for the first time, but it means they only can watch maybe an hour or two of television at all. And it's really there for basically lights. And if you try to, if your wife wants to blow dry her hair, you got to run and go outside and start a gas generator because it won't work, right? You'll tank the unit. And what we do with those is they cost about $18,000 to install. and what customers pay somewhere between $75 and $95 to us, and we go out twice a year to make sure that everything's working and that type of thing. That's the point. So those are the off-grid units we have. Any other questions? So most people don't realize this, but when you live on a reservation or the Navajo Nation or any reservations, the Native American folks don't own the land. The United States government took the land away from the folks because they didn't think that they could manage their own lands. And the United States government holds it in a trust for the people. Okay? So you can't go to the bank to borrow money because you don't own the land, right? It's a difficult situation. But what that means is I have to go through the federal right-of-way process to do anything. I want to put in a water line. I want to put in an electric line. And what that means basically is I've got to go out and do a survey, right? Got to do the engineering, but I got to do the archaeological research, the zoological research, plants, fish, water, all those type of things, all the environmental things, right? It takes on average for me to get through the process and the paperwork, because I get the land for free, right? It takes 1.5 to 2 years to go through the process, and it costs $10,500 per mile of line, per right-of-way. And if I run a water line, I can't put the water line in the electric right-of-way, right? I have to get a separate right-of-way. So a lot of that process and the bureaucracy behind the process, in my opinion, is a waste of resources, because I'd rather use those resources building the line and getting the people the services. I never expected to be in this position, to be honest with you. Never in my wildest dreams. So to answer your question, the best way I can answer it is, I was working for the city of Jamestown, New York. We had old coal-fired power plants that had environmental issues, had problems. The community wanted to keep those jobs and those resources in the community. So we worked on trying to put in a new fluidized bed power plant, coal plant, in New York, okay? And we worked on that project for a long time, and we actually, in the state of New York, it's a very weird state, but you've got two houses in the state government. One is completely Republican, one's completely Democrat, and they don't agree about anything, and they don't like each other, okay? We were actually able to get a legislative package through both of those bodies that was going to provide grant dollars from the state because they wanted to use this facility as a research facility. We got that through. Governor Pataki was the governor at that point in time. Governor Pataki was an interesting fella. It was towards the end of his term. I had business after business after business send faxes to the governor's office saying, sign this, sign this, sign this. So about the 11:59th hour, he vetoed it, okay? And the reason he vetoed it is because he was technically running for the President of the United States, but really what he wanted to do is he wanted to be in charge of the EPA, and he didn't think he'd ever get in charge of the EPA if he allowed a coal-fired power plant to be built in his state under his watch. So I worked on trying to overcome that and get it overridden by the legislative bodies. Eliot Spitzer came into office. Okay, very, very environmentally minded person, right? And Eliot Spitzer made an offer to my community that they couldn't refuse. He made an offer behind the scenes that he was going to take their 2-year junior college and make it into a 4-year university if they gave up the coal plant. Well, giving up the coal plant meant that they had to get rid of me. So I was subsequently let go on short-term notice. There was a lot of environmentalists out there who were on the internet creating fake news, not Donald Trump fake news, but really fake news, you know. I was supposedly investigated by the FBI. I had the state's attorney investigating me and all those kinds of things. So I went around for the next 1.5 years, because I had 3 young kids still, and wasn't expecting this. I went around for the next year trying to find a job. I was the bridesmaid at many, many locations. And usually what killed me was, I actually had people start to talk to me about hiring me, but what killed me was is people would do research on the internet and go, oh my God, you can't hire this guy. What's going on here, right? So I applied for the Navajo job. They called me for the interview process, and I looked it over, and I said, you know, I can't do this to my children. I can't go there. So I pulled my name out of the running for the job. And then in November, right around Christmas time, I was in New York with my family. I was in Chicago visiting family members with my family. I get a phone call from the Navajo Nation saying, well, our general manager that we just hired didn't show up. And I said, okay, all right. So I'm like, that wasn't me, I don't think. What they said was, no, you don't understand. We're a public entity, and we have to go through a public process, and you're the only one who was approved on the list that we never interviewed. We'd really like you to come out and interview. And I was in Illinois, actually, going to sign a contract to work for Peru, Illinois, which had 17 employees. So I was going to go from 170 employees down to 17 employees. And that's probably not the best career move you could make, right? My wife and I talked about it, and she said, you got nothing to lose. Why don't you just go out there and see what it's about? So I flew up on New Year's Eve. I spent New Year's Day by myself. My wife and family stayed in Chicago. And then the day after New Year's, they interviewed me. And about a half hour after I was interviewed, they offered me the job. And I talked to my wife on the phone, and she's always a very enlightening person. You know, as we had the conversation, she said, you know, you're going to have 500 employees. It's going to look like a step up. If you go there for a year and you do some things that are good that you've always done before, you know, this stuff from New York will go away, right? So the thought was, I'm going to go there. I'm going to spend a year. They wanted me for 5 years. We signed a 4-year contract, but you can get out of contracts pretty easy. So I went there for a year, and then I'll answer the back part of your question. That's the difficult part. My wife came out, looked over the place and said, you know, we'll look at the different communities around it. Maybe we could stay. So we looked at some cities that weren't too far away and those type of things. But the funny thing happened about a month after I was there. I had told the board when I came I needed to go out in the field to actually visit with people, see the facilities. We have 6 district offices. Each district office is an hour and a half away. My farthest office is 3 hours away. I have assets all over the nation, so I wanted to go out to those district offices and understand what I was supposed to manage, right? The board didn't want me to do that, but I went out anyways because I'm stubborn and I wanted to meet people and understand what was going on. And I went through that whole process, and I came back, and we have a board meetings face-to-face every other month. So this is my very first board meeting with my new board. In the middle of the afternoon, I get a phone call saying that one of my workers was injured in an accident around the Grand Canyon and that they were helicoptering him to a hospital. And I asked, well, is he still alive? And they said, yes. I get a phone call later telling me he's passed away. I get a phone call saying he's still okay. I get a phone call saying he passed away at the end of the day. So what I did is I felt the need to go out there. I felt the need to go out to my district office and talk to my employees and address them. We had a death in Navajo about 5 years before I got there. And one of the things I had heard was nobody from headquarters showed up. And I thought that was really odd, that no one would show up through the process, and I didn't want that to happen this time around. So against the advice of my board, a deputy general manager and myself drove 3 hours because it was my farthest away district office. There's about 45 employees at this office. And I'd only been at the office once before, so I wanted to go by. I was staying at the Quality Inn. I wanted to go by the office so I knew where it was in the morning, right? I go by the office 9 o'clock at night, and all the lights on the office and the parking lot is full. In fact, it's overflowing. So I say to my deputy manager, what's going on? He goes, well, it's probably the employees and maybe the family members because they didn't have a place to meet. And I said, well, we need to go in there. And he's like, no, you don't really want to go in there. I said, no, I have to go in there. If I came all this way, we've got to go in there. So I walked in there, and I was very ill prepared for the moment. when I walked in there because it was the family members. And this was a young apprentice line worker that got killed in a construction accident. And the first thing that happened when I walked around the corner, believe it or not, was his two little children. He had a 3-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old daughter. They ran up to me, grabbed my leg. I've never seen these children before in my life. And the older one looked up to me and asked me when their daddy was coming home. And that was a very, very tough moment because it was in front of everybody. So I had to address the family and my employees and staff members, which I did. And we stayed there and we talked. And the best thing I did, and I had no idea what I was going to do and why I'd do what I would do, is I actually met the young man. His name was Timothy Yazzie. I had met him the only time I had been out there. The line crew was so proud of this young man that they had bought him a jacket. And because the new general manager came out to visit, they wanted to have a picture of him with the general manager with his new jacket. And that's how I met him, from that standpoint. So I got up and I spoke about how I met Timothy and what that meant to me for the first time I was out there. And then family members and employees came up afterwards and talked about their stories with Timothy. Okay? We finished that. The next morning, I got up, came into the office. I was kind of surprised they had closed the office. Again, completely full house, 8 o'clock in the morning. What I didn't know at that point in time is I expected the EAP counselors to be there because we had called them. So I expected to have some folks because I'm not a psychologist and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn and I can't pretend to be one. And they didn't show up. They weren't there. So we had to address the family and the workers again. And what I didn't know is I had the Navajo Nation's Safety Department in there. I had OSHA in there. I had Bureau of Indian Affairs in there. I had all these folks. I had no idea who anybody was, to be honest with you. I just saw faces in the crowd. And we went through the same process. And the key part of the story I forgot to tell you was I called my wife probably about midnight back home when I finished, because it's a 2-hour time difference. I woke her up. And I had to do that because I had to tell her what just happened to me the night, that night. She listened to me. After she heard what I had to say, she's a woman of few words. She told me that I needed to stay there and make sure that never happened again. So to answer your question, that's why I'm still there. So,
I don't know how you follow that, but thank you so much for joining us today. It was a very inspirational and educational message that I'm sure is going to be with us for quite some time. So we have a little something for you to take back from Nebraska. Not from Husker, but from Nebraska. So, thank you so much. See, my daughter just tears it open. She's
cool.
it's like a Nebraska coaster set.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for
my time here and my visit. And it really has been my privilege and honor to be able to talk to you folks. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, an event like this doesn't happen with a group of people behind it. So at this time, I would like to thank a special group of folks here at LES. Tiffany Musil, who is the primary lead for this event, Rachel Barth, Brooke Rogers, Lucas Farr, Jenny Hassenjaeger, and Bree Hammerstrom are on the communications team. So would you join me in giving them a round of applause? We also have two folks that make it to all LES events and make sure that we capture those moments. So we have Jamie Wentz in the back and Randy Hampton over here in the corner who take video and photography for us. So join me in thanking them. Before we close, I want to remind you all, if you didn't see in the front, that we have two massive size Get Well Soon cards for Jared and John. So if you haven't had a moment to sign those, please keep it clean, and we'll go ahead and get those delivered to them. And now we are going to be stepping to, right outside of this building, we're going to be taking a group LES photo. So we'll have some folks we have our employee council that's going to help direct traffic. Randy's going to be up in a bucket truck. So we hope that you'll be able to join us just shortly after this meeting, and we'll go ahead and take that. And one more announcement. Oh yes, before we send you off, we also had something that we wanted to share. Thank you to Brent Foxhoven, who
I should have known these walls would cave in. Should have never left my heart there on the line. Cause when the shit hit the fan, all we ever had ended up lost in the fire. And now nothing's saved, nothing's gained. Was it all in vain? Cause I'm standing in the eye of the storm, and everything I've known is blowing away. Dead or alive, and I know that I'd be willing to feel the pain if it got me to the other side.